The wind was sharp enough to sting my cheeks as I pushed my wheelchair up the slight ramp leading into Marigold Cafe. The bell over the door chimed softly, a sound that usually felt warm and familiar, but today it barely cut through the ache in my arms. The cold had crept into my fingers again, making every push stiff and slow. I just needed warmth, a few minutes indoors. Maybe a cup of tea if I had enough in my wallet after groceries. The floor inside was glossy from recent mopping, and as the wheels rolled across it, they slipped for a moment. I steadied myself, tightening my grip until my knuckles whitened. One wheel caught the edge of a rug near the counter and jerked slightly. Behind me, a man muttered loudly enough for half the cafe to hear that I should watch where I was going. I inhaled, swallowed, told myself not to react. I was used to these little stings, the kind that never looked like cruelty from the outside, but carved tiny cuts inside the person receiving them. I was adjusting my scarf when the cafe manager walked toward me, hands on her hips, brows pulled tight. She raised her voice immediately as if her words needed to perform for the entire room. "You are blocking the aisle. If you are not ordering a full meal, this is not a shelter." Conversations quieted. A chair scraped. Someone whispered. My stomach twisted in the familiar way. Humiliation always arrived hot and cold at once. I opened my mouth to explain that I only needed a moment to warm up, but nothing came out. My throat tightened. I could feel eyes on me, the silent judgment that always made my chest feel small. Before I could find my voice, a tiny hand reached down and picked up the napkin I had dropped. "Are you okay?" The soft little voice belonged to a girl maybe 6 years old, with loose brown curls and big, curious eyes. She smiled at me with none of the discomfort the adults had. Just simple concern. Her innocence punctured the tension for a moment, letting me breathe again. I smiled weakly. "Thank you, sweetheart." But the relief lasted only seconds. When I looked around for a place to sit, every table was full. Except for one, or half of one. A table by the window with a man sitting alone, tall, dark-haired, sharply dressed in a way that suggested success, but not the kind that needed to flaunt itself. He sat with a posture that seemed sturdy but tired the way a person might look after carrying something heavy for years. His expression was unreadable. Calm, distant somewhere far from this noisy cafe. I hesitated. People like him did not usually want someone like me at their table. Lily, the little girl, tugged the man's sleeve. "Daddy," she said with a warm insistence. "She can sit with us." "Please." The man looked at his daughter, then at me. His eyes held no pity, just observation, quiet and steady. I waited for him to say no, to offer a gentle excuse, something polite, but distancing. Before he could speak, the manager swooped back in louder than before. "She is making customers uncomfortable." I felt my face burn. My fingers pressed so tightly into the armrests of my chair that they began to ache. The man slowly stood. His voice when he spoke was calm, but carried a sharpness that sliced through the room without needing to rise. "She sits here, and you will change your tone." The manager froze. Several customers shifted, unsure what to do with the confrontation unfolding. He did not glare or threaten. He simply stood with a presence that made refusal impossible. Lily beamed and pulled the empty chair slightly back, making a space for me at their table. I swallowed hard, pushing myself forward. As I reached the table, Lily leaned in close and said with a sincerity that made something in my chest soften, "I saved this seat for you. I think you were supposed to sit with us." I blinked, stunned by the kindness of a child and the quiet authority of her father. I settled into the space beside them, still trembling a little from the sharp swing between humiliation and relief. My eyes lifted to the man's face, wanting to thank him, but words refused to form. He simply nodded once as if to say, "I saw what happened. You deserve better." I did not know it then as I sat across from this stranger with tired eyes and a little girl who had more empathy than the room combined, but this moment would become the pivot of my life. I had no idea he was a widowed CEO, no idea he carried wounds as deep as mine, no idea that a seat saved by a child would reshape the course of all 3 of our lives. For a moment after I settled at the table, the cafe buzzed around us like a distant hum, as if the rest of the world had stepped back to give the 3 of us space. Lily swung her legs, happily tracing circles on the wooden floor with the tip of her pink sneaker. I tried to steady my breathing, still shaken by the confrontation and unsure how to begin any kind of conversation. The man across from me folded his hands loosely, his posture calm but impossible to interpret. His presence felt grounded, the kind that absorbed tension instead of feeding it. The quiet stretched between us, not awkward, but fragile. I finally managed, "Thank you for what you said earlier." He shook his head slightly. "No thanks needed. People deserve respect." His voice carried the same calm certainty he had used with the manager. No bravado, no arrogance, just a simple statement of principle. He did not mention my wheelchair. He did not look at me with pity or exaggerated kindness. His gaze held steady level human. That alone was disarming. Lily picked up a crayon from her pocket and began drawing on a napkin, humming to herself. She glanced up at me. "Do you like flowers or stars better?" I blinked at the question, surprised. "Flowers?" I said softly. She nodded with the seriousness of a tiny professional artist and returned to her work. Her father watched her with a tenderness that softened the firm lines of his face. When he looked back at me, his expression grew more reserved again, almost guarded. I realized he was polite, but there was a quiet grief in him, like a shadow that never fully lifted. I tried lifting my cup for a sip of tea, but my fingers trembled from the cold and fatigue. The cup wobbled in my hand before I steadied it. I hoped he had not noticed, but his eyes flicked down subtly, not with alarm, not with judgment, just awareness. My cheeks warmed. "Sorry, my grip gets weak when it's cold." "Nothing to be sorry for," he said simply. I swallowed, surprised by how gently he dismissed the embarrassment. People often reacted with concern, too heavy, or worse, impatience. But not him. He shifted the conversation lightly, asking, "Do you come here often?" "Only on my break between the library programs. I volunteer there." "Story time for kids." That made him raise an eyebrow with a faint smile. "Storytelling. That explains why Lily is already attached." Lily giggled as if she somehow understood the joke. Before I could respond, the manager walked past again, giving me a tight, disapproving look as she wiped down an already spotless counter. Anxiety prickled in my chest. Maybe I should leave so I do not cause any trouble. The man lifted his gaze to me, steady and unwavering. "There is no trouble. You are a paying customer sitting in a public cafe. That is all." I lowered my eyes, embarrassed at my own instinct to shrink. He added quietly, "Everyone deserves space and dignity." Something about the way he said dignity lodged itself inside me. It was not performative, not meant to impress. It was as if he was reminding himself as much as me. I studied him for a second. His polished appearance, the expensive but understated watch, the subtle exhaustion around his eyes. He was a man carrying a weight he did not advertise. That intrigued me more than anything. I wanted to ask about it, but I could not bring myself to pry. Instead, I watched as Lily finished her drawing and proudly slid the napkin across the table. It showed 3 figures, a tall one, a small one, and one in a wheelchair with flowers around her. She tapped it. "This is you. And Daddy. And me." My breath caught. Her father stared at the drawing for a few seconds, something flickering behind his eyes. Gratitude. Sadness. Maybe both. He cleared his throat softly. "Lily, that is very thoughtful." She beamed. "Because she needed a friend today." Did I wondered. Or had I just grown so used to loneliness that kindness felt like foreign territory? I folded the napkin carefully. "It is beautiful." "Thank you." She swung her legs again. "Daddy says people who draw together can be friends fast." Her father looked horrified by the sudden exposure, and I almost laughed. I liked the humanity in his reaction. He shook his head slightly. "I said something like that once, not today." Lily shrugged, unconcerned with accuracy. "Same thing." I smiled, easing into the moment. He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me with an expression polite yet searching. He asked, "What made you choose storytelling?" I hesitated. Most people asked why I was in a wheelchair before anything else. It threw me off that he didn't. I just always loved giving kids a world where things could be better than they are. His eyes softened in a way that made me think the sentence struck somewhere personal. He looked like a man who needed a better world too, even if he pretended otherwise. Before I could say more, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening briefly. Responsibility tugged at him like a physical weight. He silenced the phone instead of answering. I blinked. "You can take it." He shook his head. "It can wait." He said the words lightly, but they felt heavy, almost conflicted. I wondered what kind of life demanded so much of him. He checked the time, then stood placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "We should go. The afternoon crowd will come in soon." He looked at me before turning. "It was good sitting with you. I felt something pull inside me." "You too." Lily waved enthusiastically. "Bye, friend." And just like that they were gone, swallowed by the shifting crowd and the cold air outside. But as I watched them leave, a strange certainty settled over me. This wasn't the end of our conversation. Not even close. When I left the cafe, the cold air hit me with a force that made my shoulders tense. The warmth from inside faded too quickly, replaced by the sharp winter wind that sliced through my sweater. I pulled the collar up higher around my neck and adjusted my gloves, the worn fabric stretching thin over my palms. The sidewalk outside Marigold Cafe had always been uneven, but today the cracks and dips felt harsher under the small wheels of my chair. My arms were tired from the long morning at the library, but I pushed on steady and practiced. This was my rhythm, the one I had learned to master after the accident. As I rolled forward, Lily's little drawing rested inside my bag, the napkin folded carefully as if it were something precious. In truth, it felt like it was. A stranger's child had looked at me and seen someone worth drawing into her world. I didn't know why the gesture touched me so deeply. Maybe because it had been a long time since anyone saw me as part of something. Snow flurries began to drift from the sky, soft at first, then faster. I stopped to adjust the bags hanging from the back of my chair so they wouldn't swing against the wheels. Just as I leaned sideways, a gust of sharp wind shoved against me stronger than I expected. The force pushed the tote bag off my lap, scattering a few papers onto the sidewalk. I reached for them, but stretching too far threw off my balance. The chair tilted slightly. A familiar panic shot through my chest as I grabbed the wheel to steady myself. I pulled back quickly, breath-catching. I managed to avoid falling, but the moment rattled me. My hands shook from the sudden fear and the cold burrowing into my joints. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to breathe again. It was just another moment. I'd had plenty. Still, my heart thudded against my ribs as I gathered the papers one at a time. A passing couple hurried around me without stopping, the man muttering something under his breath about keeping the sidewalk clear. I swallowed and kept moving. When I finally set the papers back on my lap, I let myself pause. I rubbed my palms together, trying to coax warmth back into my fingers. Behind me, the cafe door opened again and voices spilled out. I didn't turn. I didn't want anyone to see how shaken I was. Instead, I pushed forward, heading toward the bus stop a block away. What I didn't know was that Ethan had paused before stepping into the street. Through the tall window of Marigold Cafe, he watched everything. He had been gathering Lily's coat, preparing to help her into the car, when his eyes lifted and found me outside. At first, he looked with simple awareness. Then the moment shifted. He saw the bag fall. He saw me reach too far. He saw the tilt of the chair, the flash of panic the way I grabbed the wheel to stay upright. His hand stilled on Lily's zipper. His face changed almost imperceptibly, something tightening and softening at the same time. This was a man who had spent years watching people evaluating risk-making decisions under pressure. But the look in his eyes now wasn't the sharp calculation of a CEO. It was something quieter, something he wasn't used to feeling. Lily tugged his sleeve as he stood frozen at the window. "Daddy, look!" She pointed with concern, her small eyebrows pulled together. "Is she okay?" He didn't answer her right away. He watched me straighten my papers, watched my hands tremble in the cold, watched me take a breath that visibly steadied my whole body. He saw the way I forced myself forward, shoulders set, chin lifted a little higher than I probably felt. He saw resilience, strength, and something else that unsettled him. Not weakness, not fragility, something he recognized in himself. Loneliness. Lily pressed again, her voice worried. Daddy Ethan finally blinked, pulling himself back into the present. He knelt to help her with the last button of her coat, but his gaze drifted towards the window again, unable to detach fully. Lily asked softly, "Should we help her?" It was in her nature to ask that. She had her mother's heart, the kind that felt other people's discomfort before they spoke it. Ethan looked down at her and brushed a curl from her cheek. "She is okay, sweetheart. She is stronger than she looks." The words came out quietly, like he was admitting them to himself, but his eyes stayed fixed on me long after I crossed the street. I didn't know he had seen anything. I didn't know that moment, small as it seemed, left something lodged in his thoughts. I continued toward the bus stop, adjusting my scarf again as the snow thickened. A bus approached, wheels hissing against the wet road, and I prepared to board. I glanced back once at the cafe, more habit than intention. Through the window, I saw a shadow of movement, but not the details, just a tall figure and a smaller one beside him. Then the bus doors opened with a heavy sigh, blocking my view. As I rode away, I felt a strange ripple in my chest, a faint pull I couldn't explain. It was as if something unfinished lingered between the cafe and the cold street. Something waiting. Behind the cafe window, Ethan stood still long after I disappeared from sight. He didn't understand why he couldn't look away, but he knew one thing with surprising clarity. He hadn't seen the last of me. The next afternoon, the library hummed with the kind of soft noise that always comforted me. Children's laughter echoed between shelves, punctuated by the rustling of pages and the occasional thump of a book dropped too enthusiastically. I rolled my chair across the checkered carpet and positioned myself near the story corner, where a semicircle of tiny chairs faced my easel. I set out the hand-drawn boards I used for storytelling. They were simple illustrations, but made with care, each thick line and splash of color meant to guide a child's imagination. Art had always been the one place where I could still move freely, even after my body no longer could. Today's story was about a small owl who couldn't fly but learned to glide by trusting the wind. I had written it years ago, long before I knew I would need its message more than the children ever would. As the kids filed in swinging their backpacks and coats, their excitement filled the room with a warmth the building's old radiators could never match. "Miss Lila, are we reading The Owls today?" "Yes," I smiled. "But today you get to help me give the owl a voice." That earned cheers. I glanced at the door out of habit. No reason, just instinct. I didn't expect Ethan. I didn't expect Lily. But after yesterday, I couldn't deny the small hope tucked in my chest. The room settled. I began turning pages, shifting each illustrated board into place. As the owl made its first clumsy leap, the children gasped at the right moments, giggled at the silly ones, and leaned forward when the story grew quiet. There was something sacred about how children listened. They didn't judge. They didn't interrupt with the kind of assumptions adults carried like armor. They just received. One little boy in a blue sweater scooted closer to my chair. He always did. He liked the wheels. I continued reading, gesturing with my hands, letting my voice rise and fall like the breeze in the owl's wings. A few parents watched from the back. Most seemed content, smiling politely. All except one. A woman in a tailored jacket stood with her arms crossed tightly, lips pressed thin. Halfway through the story, she muttered loudly enough for several parents to hear. "This program is so basic. I thought the library was improving its funding." A few heads turned. I kept my voice steady, continuing as if I hadn't heard, but her words pressed against the edges of my focus. She went on. "Where are the digital screens or proper materials? This looks cheap." My heart pinched. Not because of the insult, but because the children could hear. The boy in the blue sweater glanced up at me, waiting to see how I'd react. I inhaled slowly. At the next page turn, I paused. I smiled at the class. "Do you know what I love about stories? They don't need to be fancy to matter. All they need is imagination." The children nodded eagerly. The boy whispered, "And your pictures." I grinned. "And your pictures, too. Let's make our own ending today. Who wants to help?" The energy in the room shifted instantly. The parents leaned closer. The children sat straighter. I handed out blank papers and crayons, encouraging them to draw how they imagined the owl learning to soar. Suddenly, the room was alive with color and creativity. The stiff-jawed parent fell silent, as children proudly displayed their work, comparing Wingspan's colors and ideas. I felt the tension melt. This was where I belonged. When the session ended, parents thanked me as they gathered backpacks and winter coats. The critical mother left quickly, no apology, no acknowledgement. But it didn't matter. The children had loved it. The story had landed. That was enough. As I organized my boards, I felt a faint prickle on the back of my neck, the kind you feel when someone is watching. I turned. Across the room, partially hidden behind the tall nonfiction shelves, stood Ethan. He wasn't close enough for the children to notice him, and he didn't step forward. He simply watched, hands in the pockets of his coat, his expression unreadable but softened in a way I hadn't seen before. My breath caught. How long had he been standing there? Why had he come? He didn't wave. He didn't interrupt. He didn't approach even as the last child left. Instead, he nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement, like someone recognizing something they had been looking for without knowing it. Strength. Not the loud kind. Not the physical kind, but the kind that held people together in the places they cracked. I blinked, startled by how deeply that look reached into me. Before I could wheel closer, a librarian asked me about scheduling next week's program. When I glanced back toward the shelves, Ethan was gone. Vanished the way he had appeared. Quietly, purposefully, leaving behind a strange warmth in the empty doorway. I packed my materials slowly, my thoughts tangled. Had he really been there? Why hadn't he said anything? The question stayed with me the entire way home, echoing softly like the last line of a story unfinished. The bakery always smelled like warm sugar at night, a scent that usually comforted me even after the longest days. But tonight, the sweetness felt heavy in the air, almost suffocating as my exhaustion pressed hard against my body. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering faintly the way they always did when the heating system kicked in. I had taken the evening shift because the library hours alone weren't enough to cover rent, groceries, and the quiet but constant medical expenses that still clung to my life years after the accident. The manager called it a simple job. Simple didn't mean easy. I rolled behind the counter, wiping down trays and sorting paper bags. My shoulders ached from story hour earlier, and my hands trembled slightly when I reached for the next stack of boxes. Low blood sugar again. I recognized the warning signs, but I told myself I could push through the last hour. I always pushed through. The bell above the door jingled as customers came and went, the usual late evening crowd, students with headphones, a couple sharing a pastry, a delivery driver grabbing coffee. Nothing out of the ordinary. I kept working, my breaths growing shorter, my vision dipping in and out of focus. I steadied myself on the counter. Not now. Please, not now. The oven timer beeped and I pivoted quickly to check the pastries cooling on the lower rack. The motion was too fast for how weak I'd become. My hand slipped. My chair jolted. My vision blurred into white static. I felt myself tipping the world, tilting sideways. The floor rose up far too quickly. A sharp cry escaped me, more from fear than impact, before everything went silent. When sound finally returned, it was muffled and frantic. Lila. Oh my God. Lila, are you okay? I blinked, disoriented, and saw Megan, the high schooler who worked part-time, crouched beside me. Her eyes were wide with panic. You fainted? She said, already reaching for her phone. I'm calling 911. No. My voice cracked as I grabbed her wrist weakly. No ambulance. Please. She froze. But you collapsed. You hit the floor. I shook my head, though it made the room wobble. I can't afford an ER bill. Megan hesitated, torn between protocol and compassion. In America, emergency help wasn't just help. It was debt. Crushing debt. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like wet sand pouring into itself. Megan placed a hand behind my back. Please, Lila, you need a doctor. I'll be fine. I just need a minute. Sweat coated my forehead despite the cold draft from the door. My vision pulsed. The edges darkened. The bell above the entrance chimed again. I didn't look up. I didn't have the strength. Then I heard Lily's voice, high and terrified. Daddy! She fell. My heart stuttered. Megan looked over my shoulder. Her face shifted from panic to sheer relief. Thank God, she whispered. Footsteps rushed toward me, steady and purposeful. Then Ethan knelt beside me, his expression carved with worry so deep it startled me. I blinked up at him disoriented. What? What are you doing here? Buying dinner rolls, he answered quietly, though his voice carried a tight edge. But the truth is, I saw the lights on and thought, maybe I'd run into you. The admission stunned me almost as much as my fall. He placed 2 fingers gently at my wrist, checking my pulse, then looked up at Megan. What happened? She fainted, Megan said, her voice shaking. I think her blood sugar dropped. She won't let me call an ambulance. He didn't look surprised by that, only troubled. He turned back to me, his gaze steady but urgent. You need medical attention. I tried to turn away, but his hand rested lightly on my shoulder, stopping me. I'm not taking you to an ER. I know what that means for you. My eyes flicked up to his. There was no pity there, only understanding. Then where? The community clinic on Pine Street, he said. My company funds it. They'll take you right away. It's safe, trustworthy, and affordable. The relief that washed over me was so sharp it nearly hurt. He wasn't offering charity. He wasn't swooping in like some savior. He was giving me a realistic option, a logical one, an American one. He turned to Lily, who was clinging to his coat, her eyes watery. Sweetheart, it's okay. She's going to be fine. Lily sniffed and looked at me. Do you need a hug? Even in my foggy state that made my chest tighten. Not right now, honey, but thank you. Ethan slid one arm behind my back and another under my knees. Wait, I whispered. You don't have to. I do, he said softly with a certainty that silenced my protest. He lifted me with surprising ease. His movements were careful, respectful, not rushed. Megan grabbed my bag and followed us out. Snow had started falling again, dusting the sidewalk. Ethan carried me to his car, opened the back door, and gently set me down before retrieving my wheelchair. Lily climbed in beside me, her small hand reaching for mine with fragile bravery. I squeezed her fingers. It's okay, I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Ethan drove fast, but smooth, glancing at me in the rearview mirror every few seconds. Stay awake, Lila, he said quietly. Talk to me. About what? Anything. Tell me your favorite book. I managed a faint laugh. That's like asking someone their favorite color of air. He exhaled a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Good. Keep talking. The clinic lights glowed ahead like a small beacon. When he pulled into the lot, nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. Ethan spoke to them with firm clarity, explaining what happened, staying beside me until they guided me inside. The moment I was settled in the exam room, he sat in the chair at my bedside, not hovering, not anxious, just present. Lily curled up against his side, watching me with wide, worried eyes. As the nurse checked my vitals, Ethan's gaze never left me. When I finally felt stable again, warmth returning to my fingers, he exhaled softly. You scared us, he said. I looked away, embarrassed. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Lila. His voice deepened. You don't have to go through moments like this alone. Something in my chest shifted, carefully, quietly, as if something long frozen had cracked open just a little. The nurse left us alone. The room hummed with soft lights. Ethan watched me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Something tender, something wounded, something hopeful. I didn't understand any of it. Not yet. The clinic room had that familiar sterile hush, the kind that made every sound feel louder than it should be. The hum of the heating vent, the soft tapping of Lily's sneakers against the chair legs, the distant echo of nurses moving through the hallway. I lay back against the exam bed, the paper beneath me crackling every time I shifted. The worst of the dizziness had passed, but a lingering heaviness stayed in my limbs, like my body was reminding me just how close I'd come to collapsing completely. Ethan sat in the chair beside me, his elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. Not tense, but concentrated, as if trying to understand something he couldn't quite shape into words. Lily had dozed off against his arm, her curls falling across his coat sleeve. He brushed a hand over her hair absent-mindedly, not taking his eyes off me. You should have told someone, he said, finally quietly. About what I asked, though, the answer was obvious. He tilted his head. About how tired you've been. How hard your days are. How close you were to collapsing. People push themselves until they break. You didn't have to. I let out a slow breath. That's the thing, Ethan. When you live alone, when you don't want to burden anyone, you get good at pretending you're fine. You just keep going because stopping feels worse. He nodded, but his expression darkened with something deeper. Understanding. Or memory. I stared at the ceiling. It was easier than meeting his eyes. It's embarrassing, you know. Falling like that. Being carried out. I hate feeling helpless. You weren't helpless, he said. You were hurting. Those aren't the same. The correction made something tight inside me loosen, though I didn't show it. I shifted slightly, wincing as my shoulder protested from the fall. He noticed instantly. Every muscle in him sharpened. Does it hurt? He asked. Just sore. I'll be fine. He didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his jaw as if wrestling with something unspoken. When he finally spoke, his voice felt heavier. Lila, can I ask you something? I hesitated. Yes. Why do you apologize for things that aren't your fault? The question hit deeper than I expected. My breath caught. I looked away. Habit, I said quietly. Or self-defense. Or both. He didn't move, didn't interrupt, didn't soften it with platitudes. He just waited. And for some reason, that made the truth rise faster in my throat. After the accident, after losing so much of what I thought my life would be, people looked at me differently, like I was fragile, a burden, someone they had to make room for instead of someone who belonged. He listened without blinking. And when you feel like that long enough, you learn to say sorry before anyone has a chance to think you're asking too much. His jaw tightened. Who made you think asking for help was too much? I shook my head. No one person. Just life. People disappear when things get hard. His eyes flickered. Someone disappeared on you. My throat tightened. A lot of people did. But one person. Yes. He stayed still, his gaze anchored to mine, and in that silence, everything inside me felt exposed. I swallowed. My fiancé. He left a few weeks after the accident. Never came to the hospital. Never called. Just vanished. The words left my mouth in a whisper that barely felt like sound. Saying it aloud even after all this time brought a sting behind my eyes. Ethan exhaled slowly, almost like he'd been punched in the chest. I'm sorry, he said, but not in that throwaway sympathetic way. It sounded like he meant it, like he felt it. I looked down at my hands. Pain doesn't scare me anymore, but abandonment still does. It always does. The room fell quiet again, a quiet filled with unsaid things. After a moment, he spoke, and something in his voice shifted. I know what that feels like. I looked at him startled. He glanced down at Lily sleeping against his arm. When my wife was sick, people drifted away. Friends, family, colleagues. At first, they promised to help. But when things got hard, when she needed more care, when the days got heavy, they all faded, one by one. His gaze dropped to his hands. Terminal illness makes people uncomfortable. They don't know how to stay. The honesty in his voice made my chest tighten. I watched him carefully. I'm sorry, Ethan. He lifted his eyes. She fought for a long time, longer than they expected. He paused. Then, one morning, she was gone. I didn't breathe. Lily was 3. He brushed a curl from her cheek. I didn't just lose my wife. I lost everyone else who didn't know how to stand beside grief. He looked up again. And after that, I stopped letting people close. I was afraid to need anyone ever again. The echo between our stories rang in the space between us. 2 people who had been left behind in different ways, who had learned to stand alone because collapsing wasn't an option. I swallowed softly. That's why you didn't walk over yesterday when you saw me almost fall in the street. His eyes widened, not in denial, but in quiet surprise that I somehow knew. He didn't answer, but the silence said enough. You were afraid I'd see it as pity, I whispered. Or that stepping in meant you cared. He looked down at Lily again, his voice almost inaudible. Maybe I was afraid of both. The heater hummed. My pulse thudded softly in my wrists. Something warm unfurled in my chest, slow and startling. "You know," I said quietly, "needing help doesn't mean you're weak." He looked up sharply and I held his gaze. "It means you're human." His expression softened, the guardedness slipping just a little. Maybe that sentence reached a place he had locked away. Maybe it reached us both. Before either of us could say more, the nurse returned to check my vitals. Ethan straightened, slipping back into silent attentiveness as she worked. When she left again, he exhaled softly. "Lila." His voice was lower now, gentle in a way that made my heart thrum. "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question surprised him as much as it surprised me. He blinked, stunned, as if caught off guard by the truth sitting between us. For a moment, he said nothing. But the look in his eyes, that was an answer all its own. The next morning, the world felt unusually still, as if the snowfall had muffled not just the streets, but the noise inside my mind. I lay on my couch wrapped in a blanket, my body still sluggish from the collapse, but steadier than the night before. The clinic had released me with instructions to rest, hydrate, and monitor my blood sugar carefully. Rest. Such a simple word for something that rarely felt possible. But today, the quiet felt almost necessary. I reached for my phone to check the time and noticed a new email notification. My breath hitched when I saw the sender HooverTech Creative Division. For a moment, I thought it must be a mistake. Spam, an automated message. But when I opened it, my heart gave a small, uneven flip. "Dear Ms. Lila Carter, we are reaching out regarding an opportunity within our children's media initiative. Your name and illustrative work have been recommended to our department for review. We would like to invite you to interview for the position of junior illustrator on our story development team. The interview would take place tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If you are interested, please confirm your availability. Sincerely, HR Division, HooverTech." My hand flew to my mouth. HooverTech. That HooverTech. The largest tech corporation in the region. The one whose logo was printed on nearly every digital tablet used in local schools, including the libraries. I stared at the screen, stunned. There was no way this had anything to do with Ethan. Right. He hadn't said a word about anything like this. Not last night. Not ever. And he didn't seem like someone who mixed personal kindness with business. Still, the timing. I reread the email twice, 3 times, searching for any wording that hinted at a pity invitation. Something vague, something that screamed charity, but there was nothing like that. Only a professional tone, a clear process, and the request to bring a portfolio. My portfolio. Not my wheelchair. Not my story. My work. Yet doubt crept in anyway, worming into the edges of my excitement. Did they really want me? Or did someone pull strings out of obligation? I closed the email and took a shaky breath. I needed space to think. As if the universe heard my struggle, a soft knock echoed through the apartment. My pulse leapt. I almost never had visitors. I wheeled myself to the door and opened it to find a small envelope taped neatly at eye level, no name on the front. Just a plain card inside. "Tomorrow will be a good day. Get some rest." There was no signature, but I knew immediately who had left it. Ethan. I looked down the hallway, half expecting to see him turning a corner or waiting in the elevator. But it was empty, quiet, as if he wanted the message to be felt, not acknowledged. I held the card to my chest, my throat tightening. He didn't mention the email. He didn't try to persuade me. Just a simple note, barely 10 words, offering confidence without pressure. And somehow that made it easier to breathe. The next morning, I dressed carefully, choosing a soft blue blouse and a charcoal cardigan, something clean and professional but comfortable enough to move in. I polished the wheels of my chair, brushed my hair twice, and checked my reflective strips in the winter light. Presentation mattered. But today, I wasn't dressing to impress them. I was dressing to remind myself I still belonged somewhere beyond survival. The HooverTech building rose downtown like a glass monument, sleek and intimidating. When I entered the lobby, the receptionist smiled warmly and guided me to the elevator. Everyone I passed moved fast, polished, and focused, but no one stared at my chair. Not one confused glance. Not one awkward detour around me. It felt surreal. Almost unreal. The interview room was bright with floor-to-ceiling windows and prints of children's illustrations hung across the walls. A panel of 3 sat at a table, all business, all courteous. They asked about my portfolio, my inspiration, my storytelling process. They asked how I handled deadlines, how I worked with children, how I translated emotion into visuals. Not once did they mention my disability. Not once did they speak to me with condescension pity or exaggerated praise. They looked at my work. They listened to my ideas. They treated me like any other professional candidate. Halfway through, the woman in the center lifted one of my hand-drawn owl illustrations. "This style," she said, her voice thoughtful, "is exactly the kind of warmth we want in our content." My throat tightened. "Thank you," I said, hoping my voice didn't betray the tremble inside me. When the interview wrapped and I wheeled out into the hallway, a strange lightness spread through my chest. Not joy, not relief, something steadier, something like belonging. As I exited the building, the cold air brushed against my cheeks. I paused on the curb, taking a slow breath. Maybe this opportunity really was mine. Fair and square. As I waited for the crosswalk signal, a familiar voice drifted toward me from behind. "You made it." I turned. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, looking both casual and intentional at the same time. His coat was dusted with snow, and Lily peeked out from behind him with a shy grin. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. He shrugged lightly. "Lily insisted on hot chocolate. The one place near my office that sells good cocoa is—" He gestured toward a cafe across the street. "Conveniently on your path." Lily giggled as if she knew the truth. I narrowed my eyes playfully. Did you have something to do with the interview?" Ethan's expression grew serious, but not defensive. "I recommended your name," he said simply. "You earned everything else." My breath caught. He continued, voice steady. "I saw your art at the library, the way the children responded, the way you brought stories to life. That's talent, Lila. And talent deserves opportunities, not obstacles." He looked at me, really looked. "I didn't do anything they wouldn't have seen themselves. I just made sure your name didn't get lost in a pile of resumes." The gratitude that surged in me was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," I whispered. "Truly." He nodded, but his eyes warmed. "Just promise me one thing." "What? Don't shrink yourself anymore. You belong in rooms like this, and you don't need anyone's permission to take up space." Something inside me cracked open, quiet and powerful. For the first time in a long time, I believed him. My first official day at Hoover Tech's Children's Media Initiative felt like stepping into an entirely different universe, one where the walls hummed with color and imagination, rather than the sterile gray tones I had always associated with corporate buildings. The creative wing was tucked deep inside the massive complex, separated from the brisk, suit-filled main floors by a hallway lined with framed children's illustrations and soft ambient music. As I wheeled through the sliding doors, I felt an unexpected wave of calm settle over me. It smelled faintly of paper coffee and crayons. A good sign. The team greeted me with genuine smiles, not polite ones masking discomfort. A woman named Clara waved me over to a desk already set up with adjustable height surfaces, a custom-angled tablet for digital drawing, and even a soft wrist rest. Someone had thought about accessibility. Really thought about it. I swallowed hard as gratitude tightened my throat. Clara introduced me to the others. There was Jonah, who designed character expressions, Priya, who wrote story drafts, Devin, who handled animation timing, and a handful of interns who darted around with contagious enthusiasm. Not a single person looked at my chair before looking at me. Not once. Instead, they asked about my sources of inspiration, my favorite illustrators, and whether I preferred watercolor brushes or charcoal lines in my digital work. I answered with caution at first, waiting for the moment when someone would overcompensate with forced praise or tiptoe around my disability. But it never came. No one flinched when I needed a moment to reposition myself. No one jumped forward dramatically when a pencil slipped from my hand. It felt startlingly normal, refreshingly human. And yet beneath that comfort, something anxious curled inside me, a whisper of doubt. What if I wasn't good enough here? What if I couldn't keep up? What if this world, as warm as it felt, still wasn't made for someone like me? Clara must have sensed my tension because later that morning, while showing me the digital storyboard wall, she leaned closer and whispered, "We're really glad you're here, Lila. Not just for your art, for your eye. It's rare." My chest loosened a little, maybe more than a little. We spent the morning reviewing sketches for a new series about a curious owl who traveled through magical forests. When they asked for my ideas, I hesitated only a second before speaking. The owl's wings could change color depending on his emotions, I said. Maybe they glow when he feels brave, or dim when he feels alone. Priya snapped her fingers. "That is beautiful." Jonah grabbed a marker and began redesigning the feathers on the spot. The way the team lit up made something warm spread through me. I was contributing, not surviving, not compensating, contributing. Around noon, a soft knock on the glass wall made us all look up. Ethan stood just outside, holding 2 cups of coffee and a quiet, almost shy smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. My heart stumbled. He wasn't supposed to be here, at least not casually. He was the widowed CEO, the man whose decisions shaped thousands of lives, the man I absolutely should not be reacting to with this kind of fluttering warmth. But still, there he was. When I rolled toward the door, the team exchanged a few playful glances behind me, the kind that said they already sensed something without needing any context. I pretended I didn't notice. Ethan stepped inside, careful not to disrupt the space. "I brought these for the team," he said, lifting a cardboard tray of coffees. "And one for you." He held out a cup with my name scribbled on the side in careful handwriting. My cheeks warmed as I took it. "Thank you. I didn't expect to see you here today." He shrugged lightly. "I had a meeting on this floor. Thought I'd stop by and make sure your first day was going well. Translation, he absolutely went out of his way. But I didn't challenge him on it. I didn't want to." His presence always seemed to shift something in the air, like the atmosphere leaned in slightly. Curious, gentle, intentional. He glanced around at the walls, the sketches, the buzz of creativity. "Looks like you're already making an impression," he said quietly. "And from what I can see, they're lucky to have you." I swallowed hard. His words didn't feel like encouragement. They felt like truth, which somehow made them more dangerous to my heart. As he turned to leave, Lily peeked from behind his legs, clutching a handful of stickers. "I came to give you these," she said proudly. "For your drawings." I laughed softly. "Thank you, sweetheart. They are perfect." She beamed as if I had handed her the moon. After they left, Clara nudged me with her elbow. "He brought coffee for everyone, but only 1 cup had a name on it." I nearly choked on the sip I'd just taken. "It's not like that," I said quickly. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Not yet," she murmured. I tried to refocus on work, but my pulse was still unsteady. Later in the afternoon, while adjusting a color palette on my screen, Jonah wheeled over in his chair, rolling backward just enough for me to see what he was pointing at. "You match," he said. "What your color choices? They're warm, thoughtful, kind of like that guy who brought coffee." I exhaled sharply. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to everyone with eyes," Jonah replied. "But don't worry, it's a good thing, a really good thing." My cheeks heated. As the day progressed, I fell into a rhythm. I sketched, I revised, I answered questions, I listened, I contributed. The space began to feel less like a temporary stepping stone and more like a place where I belonged, a place I could grow. But in the quiet moments between layers of color and page turns, Ethan drifted into my thoughts. The tone of his voice, the warmth in his eyes, the way he never looked at my wheelchair before looking at me. By the time I exited the building at sunset, my heart was a confusing mix of excitement, fear, curiosity, and something softer I didn't quite dare to name. At the bus stop, I lifted the coffee cup he'd given me and noticed small handwriting beneath my name. "You're exactly where you're meant to be." The words glowed warmly against the fading light. I closed my eyes, letting them sink in. Maybe, just maybe, he was becoming a part of the place I was meant to be too. The first night in my new apartment felt like stepping into a version of my life I had never believed I deserved. The walls were a soft sand color, the kind that caught late afternoon light and held it gently, almost protectively. My wheelchair hummed lightly against the smooth floors as I navigated the small but thoughtfully arranged space. Everything smelled faintly of new paint mixed with lavender cleaner, a scent I hadn't associated with home in years. I paused near the balcony, staring through the sliding glass door at the line of maple trees just outside. Their branches swayed in a slow evening rhythm, as if nodding at me, whispering welcome. For the first time in so long, I felt something unfamiliar settle inside me, safety. But trailing close behind it, almost like a shadow, came fear. Good things had never stayed in my life. Every time I reached for something warm, something promising, life always found a way to remind me it could still take everything back. I rested my hand against the cool metal frame of the balcony door and exhaled shakily. Was I allowed to have this? Enoch sounded. My heart jumped. When I opened the door, a flutter of pink barreled toward me. Lily! She threw her arms wide and announced proudly, "We brought snacks for your housewarming." Behind her, Ethan stood holding a small potted plant, something with soft green leaves and tiny white buds. Something alive. Something fragile. Something hopeful. He lifted it slightly. "For your new beginning." I swallowed a lump in my throat. "Thank you. You two didn't have to." "We wanted to," he answered, stepping inside with a quiet confidence that made the small apartment feel fuller, warmer, somehow more complete. Lily darted toward the balcony, pressing her small palms against the glass. "The trees are waving at you, Miss Lila. Or maybe waving at us." My breath caught. Us! The word hung in the air, glowing brighter than I meant it to. Ethan's eyes flickered, softening, but he didn't comment. Instead, he set the plant on my little dining table as if placing something meaningful in the center of my life, not just my home. We shared snacks. Lily picked out herself a mismatched assortment of crackers, cheese, and a lopsided blueberry muffin she insisted I try. While she chattered about school and art and a new friend who loved her sparkly boots, I watched Ethan watching her. There was a tenderness in his gaze, steady and quiet. The kind of tenderness men earned through loss, not through ease. When Lily wandered into my bedroom to look at my stack of picture books, Ethan's voice softened. "You look different here." I tilted my head. "Different how settled, at ease, like the world stopped demanding so much from you." I laughed quietly, but the sound felt fragile. "I don't know if I remember how to live without expecting something to fall apart." His expression shifted, deepened. "Lila, nothing is going to fall apart just because you built something good for yourself." But the fear was still there, crawling at the edges of my ribs. I wanted to believe him, but good men had left before. Good opportunities had slipped through my fingers. Good days had turned bad without warning. And now, here he was, a man who should have been unreachable, sitting in my tiny apartment, acting like he belonged in this pocket of my world. That scared me more than I could admit. After Lily returned, she held up a drawing she had colored earlier. It was of the three of us sitting at a cafe table with little hearts floating above our heads. I felt my breath catch painfully. "I'm framing that for your hallway," Ethan murmured, careful not to let his voice carry. Lily beamed. She then placed the drawing in my lap as if giving me something precious. "I want you to have it, Miss Lila." I wrapped my fingers around the edges, unable to speak for a moment. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful." As the evening grew late, Ethan gathered their things. Before he reached the door, he hesitated. His hand tightened briefly around the strap of his bag. "We're having an art festival at Lily's school this weekend. They're looking for someone to teach a mini workshop." "You'd be perfect." Lily bounced excitedly. "Say yes, Miss Lila, please. It would mean so much." I looked between them, feeling the warmth of their presence and the rising fear inside me. This was how it happened, how attachment slipped in, how hearts became intertwined before anyone realized it. But when Ethan met my gaze, waiting, something inside me steadied. "Yes, I'd love to," Lily squealed, running into his arms. Ethan exhaled a quiet breath of relief or gratitude, I couldn't tell. As they left, I rolled to the doorway and watched them walk down the hall. Lily swinging his hand, her curls bouncing with each step. And there it was again, that feeling. dangerous, tender, growing. I closed the door slowly, letting the quiet settle around me. Inside this new home with its soft lighting and gentle air, I was finally building a life again. But now that life included two people whose presence meant more than I was ready to admit, and that terrified me. Because wanting something so much always made the world feel more fragile. I wheeled toward the balcony once more. The maples rustled lightly as if reminding me that fear and hope often grew in the same soil. Maybe this time, if I let myself believe in something good, it wouldn't disappear. Maybe this time I wasn't standing on the edge of loss, but on the edge of something beginning. The day of the art festival began with sunlight, but by noon, the sky had dimmed into one of those gray, moody blankets that made the world feel heavier without warning. I arrived early, rolling my supplies across the school courtyard where clusters of children ran through painted cardboard arches and parents chatted over paper cups of coffee. Lily spotted me first, waving both arms enthusiastically before sprinting toward me. "Miss Lila, we have a booth next to the face painting table. You're going to make everyone's art look magical." Her excitement was contagious, and for a moment the shadows in the sky felt irrelevant. But as the afternoon went on, I noticed Ethan wasn't there. I kept telling myself he was busy, that a CEO surely had responsibilities he couldn't avoid, but the uneasiness in my stomach refused to ease. When he finally appeared almost an hour after the event began, something in his expression made the air around him crackle. His usually steady posture slumped, his jaw clenched tight. He tried to smile when Lily jumped into his arms, but it was a brittle smile thin around the edges. I waited until Lily ran off with her friend before wheeling toward him. "Are you all right?" His eyes flickered to mine, then away. "Fine. Just work." But it wasn't fine, not even close. The festival music faded into a dull murmur as I studied him. There was a stiffness in his movements, a fractured focus behind his gaze. Ethan had always carried himself with the calm of a man who'd learned to survive storms, but today that calm had holes. "What happened?" I asked gently. His breath came out shaky, like someone trying to contain too much inside. The board rejected the merger proposal. Investors are panicking. The press found out before we could control the narrative. Stock dropped 8 points in 3 hours. My chest tightened. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." He shook his head sharply. "It's not the first failure, but it's the first time I felt scared. Really scared. Not for the company. For Lily. For the life I'm trying to rebuild for her." I saw the truth flicker behind his eyes. This wasn't just about business. This was about losing his wife, the aftermath, the unraveling grief he had been trying to outrun for years. I watched him swallow hard, fighting back something heavy. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I controlled enough things, if I never let anything slip, then maybe I wouldn't lose anything ever again. But today proved I can't protect everything. And then, in the smallest, most fragile voice I had ever heard from him, he whispered, "People I love, they disappear." The words cracked something inside me. They weren't about mergers or shareholders. They were about a hospital room, a goodbye. He never wanted a grief that refused to loosen its grip. He looked away, shoulders trembling with the effort of holding himself together. I had seen Ethan in moments of confidence, moments of quiet reflection, moments of gentle kindness. But this was the first time I saw the man stripped of every polished layer. Human, hurting, breaking. And something in me reacted before I could think. I reached for his hand. Not dramatically, not urgently, simply steadily. His fingers curled around mine with a desperation that felt like a confession. "You're not alone," I said softly. "You're not failing. You're allowed to break sometimes." He closed his eyes, jaw tightening, a single breath escaping him like a surrender. Lily ran toward us again, paint on her cheeks and glitter on her hair, but she froze mid-step when she saw our hands intertwined. Her expression softened instantly. "Daddy, do you want to sit with us?" There was something hopeful in her tone, something that didn't come from obligation, but from understanding. He lifted her into his lap and held her for a long moment, burying his face in her curls. I didn't speak. I just stayed near him, letting the space around us be a quiet shelter. After a few minutes, he finally rose, still holding Lily's hand, and looked at me with an expression that felt like a turning point. "You're the only person today who didn't expect something from me. You just saw me." I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. Sometimes being seen is all we need. His gaze deepened, lingering on me long enough that the noise of the festival faded. My wheelchair, his grief, Lily between us. None of it mattered in that moment. There was a connection forming, undeniable and tender, like something we had both been tiptoeing around without saying aloud. When the festival ended and families drifted away, I stayed behind to help clean up. The sky had shifted into deeper gray, the smell of imminent rain pressing low. Ethan approached slowly Lily asleep on his shoulder, her little fingers tangled in his shirt. "Thank you," he whispered. "For today, for staying, for seeing me." I wanted to tell him I always would, that something inside me had already chosen him quietly without permission, but instead I smiled gently. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let someone else be strong for us. He stared at me for a long breath, something unspoken passing between us like a promise neither of us dared to voice. Then he squeezed my hand once more, a soft, deliberate touch that sent warmth through my entire body. As he walked away into the fading light, I felt it. Something shifting, something deepening. Not quite love yet, but close enough to make fear and hope rise together in my chest, tangled and inseparable. I did not learn the truth from Ethan. I learned it accidentally, the way life sometimes chooses the most inconvenient moment to reveal the things you were never prepared for. It happened 3 days after the art festival on a morning when the sky felt too bright for the heaviness sitting in my chest. I had arrived at the office early, hoping that getting lost in illustrations would quiet the constant replay of Ethan breaking down in front of me. I kept seeing the way his voice cracked, the way his fingers tightened around mine as if the smallest touch could hold him together. I had never felt closer to him, and that terrified me. I was setting up my tablet when 2 coworkers walked in behind me, speaking in hushed but excited tones. "Did you see the news alert?" "About Hoover Tech." "Yeah, rough week. Poor guy. He lost billions in valuation in a day." "Billions!" I stiffened. A third voice chimed in. "And did you see the headline, 'Widowed CEO Under Scrutiny After Failed Merger? Tragedy in Personal Life Revisited.'" Something icy slid down my spine. Widowed CEO. Personal tragedy. A merger collapse. My pulse began to thrum loud and erratic. No, it couldn't be. Slowly, I turned in my chair. "Who are you talking about?" They hesitated, exchanging glances. "You haven't heard the man who founded Hoover Tech, Ethan Hoover." I felt the world tilt. No one in the room noticed my breath stutter. No one heard the sharp, quiet crack that echoed through my chest. Ethan. The man who brought me coffee with my name written neatly on the cup. The man who held his daughter like she was the last soft thing in a hard world. The man who bent down to meet my gaze instead of looking down at me. The man who sat at a festival bench with his grief spilling out of him like a confession he had never spoken aloud. That man was a billionaire CEO. The man who had rescued me twice, who had funded the clinic that helped me, who had walked beside me through pain I never expected to share with anyone. I had fallen into his world without even knowing it existed, and now that I knew, everything inside me recoiled, not because of him, but because of me. I wheeled out of the office before anyone could stop me. My breath came too fast, too thin. The hallway blurred. I needed air. I needed distance. I needed to understand what this meant. Outside, I found a spot near the courtyard garden and tried to steady myself, gripping the armrests until my fingers ached. All this time, I thought Ethan was simply kind, simply gentle, simply present. But he wasn't simple at all. He was powerful, wealthy, influential, and I had been naive enough to believe we were equals in something. My throat tightened. Everything he had done for me now twisted into new shapes. What if he helped me because he felt sorry for me? Because I was a charity case, a project to fix, a story he could save. Suddenly, every memory felt tainted. My new job, my new apartment, my new life. I wanted to believe I earned them. But now a voice whispered cruelly inside me, "You are living a life built on someone else's pity." I didn't hear him approach. "Lila." His voice cut through the fog in my head. I froze. I couldn't turn around. I didn't want him to see the panic in my eyes. When I didn't respond, he stepped closer, stopping at the edge of my silence, careful not to crowd me. "I heard you left work suddenly. Are you feeling all right?" I looked at him then, and the truth of who he was pressed between us like a wall made of glass. "How long were you going to hide it from me?" The words came out sharper than I intended, trembling with fear rather than anger. His brows drew together not defensively, but with confusion. "Hide what?" "That you're Ethan Hoover, CEO of this entire empire, billionaire, public figure, constant headline, a man who lives in a world no one like me ever enters." His expression shifted slowly, realization settling into his features like a dawn he wished he could stop. "Lila, I didn't hide it. You never asked." I laughed, but it sounded cracked. "Should I have? On our first day at the cafe, should I have said, 'Excuse me, sir,' before I thank you for saving my chair from tipping? Could you clarify your net worth and corporate affiliations?" He flinched. I hated myself for the bitterness in my voice, but fear was a wild thing impossible to tame once it rose. He stepped closer. "Lila, I helped you because you were strong, because you were fighting through things no one could see, because you were you. Not because of your wheelchair, not because of pity, not because I wanted to fix anything." I shook my head hard. "But you dragged me into your world, a world I don't belong in, a world that can disappear the moment you change your mind." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. "Do you really think so little of me?" The question stunned me, and yet the truth trembled out of me. "I think little of myself, and that is the problem." Pain flickered in his eyes. He crouched beside me so we were level, his voice almost a whisper. "Lila, everything I have ever done for you was because I saw someone worth believing in, someone who had been overlooked for far too long. You think I rescued you, but you were the one who showed me how to breathe again, how to be a father again, how to live again." His voice cracked. "Please don't pull away from me because of a title I never chose." My throat tightened painfully. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But fear still curled tight around my ribs. "I need time," I whispered. "I need space to understand what this means." His face fell, but he nodded once. "Not in defeat, in respect." "I will wait," he whispered, "for as long as you need." He rose slowly, looking like a man holding shattered pieces of hope in his hands. As he walked away, Lily peeked around at the building corner, her little face confused, her big eyes soft with worry. "Did we lose her?" she whispered to him. His shoulders sagged. "Not yet, sweetheart." I closed my eyes, the words stabbing deep. "Not yet. But God help me. I didn't know how to hold on to something so fragile, something so real, something that terrified me because it mattered too much." The hardest part of healing was realizing that no one could do it for me, not even someone as gentle and steady as Ethan. In the days after our conversation, I kept replaying the look on his face when I said I needed time. Not rejection, not anger, just sorrow mixed with understanding, as if he knew exactly what it felt like to be terrified of wanting more. I avoided the cafe for a while, avoided the places where memories of him lingered like warm fingerprints. But healing is strange. It loops you back to where everything started, as if the universe insists you look again with different eyes. One chilly morning, I found myself wheeling past Marigold Cafe. Not intentionally. My hands were guiding me without asking my permission. The windows were fogged from the warmth inside. The same doorway where the manager once humiliated me. The same threshold where Lily first smiled at me. The same spot where Ethan had stood beside me without raising his voice, without hesitating, simply because it was the right thing to do. My chest tightened. I almost kept going. Almost. But then I saw a drawing taped to the inside glass. A child's drawing. 3 figures, a tall man, a girl with curls, and me, in my wheelchair, all holding hands. My breath caught. Lily. My hand reached the door before my courage could protest. The bell chimed softly, the same gentle sound that began all of this. The cafe looked exactly the same, except it didn't. Maybe it was me who had changed. Maybe I was finally seeing it clearly. The manager glanced at me from behind the counter, froze, and then straightened his posture like he had aged 5 years in responsibility overnight. "We remodeled the aisles," he blurted out. "ADA compliant, wider, accessible." I blinked, stunned. "That's good." He swallowed. "And I'm sorry for the way I spoke to you. It was wrong." His voice shook. I didn't know what to say. "Maybe forgiveness is a long road, but acknowledgement is the first honest step." "Thank you," I whispered. I rolled further in, and then I saw them. Ethan and Lily sitting at our old table near the window. Ethan's posture was tense, like he had been holding himself still for a very long time. Lily drew circles on a napkin with a purple crayon. When she looked up and saw me, her whole face lit up like someone switched on a light inside her chest. "Miss Lila!" She jumped off her chair and ran toward me, curls bouncing with a joy too honest to hide. My heart squeezed. "I missed you," she said, pressing her cheek against my shoulder as I hugged her awkwardly but tightly. "I missed you too." When I looked up, Ethan was standing, slowly, cautiously, as if any wrong move might scare me back into the cold outside. "Lila." My name in his voice softened something in me I didn't know was still hard. I swallowed the knot rising in my throat. I needed to come back. His eyes flickered with something fragile. Hope, maybe, or fear that hope could break. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the chair across from him. The gentleness undid me. It always had. "Yes." We sat. Lily climbed onto her seat, watching us with the open curiosity only children can hold without shame. Silence settled warm but trembling. I took a breath. "Ethan, when I learned who you were, I panicked. I felt small, like everything between us was built on uneven ground." His jaw tensed, but his eyes stayed soft. "I know, and I should have told you sooner." I shook my head. "No, you didn't owe me a title, but I owed myself the truth that I was scared. I was so afraid you only helped me because I was struggling, because I was someone who needed saving." He leaned forward slightly, voice low and steady. "I never wanted to save you. I wanted to walk beside you." My eyes burned. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. "I am not fragile, Ethan, but I am afraid of being someone's burden." "You're not a burden. You're a beginning." His words hit me so gently they nearly shattered me. I let out a shaky laugh. "You always know what to say." "No," he murmured. "Only when it comes to you." Lily kicked her legs and announced triumphantly, "We should sit at our table again, because this is our table. Our first day table. Our seat-saving table." The innocence of her voice washed over me like sunlight. I looked at Ethan. He looked at me. And something inside both of us settled. He nodded slowly. "If Lila agrees." I did not hesitate this time. "I agree." When the manager brought us fries without being asked, I thanked him. He nodded at me with genuine remorse before stepping away. I slid the plate of fries to the center of the table. "Things taste better when shared," I said. The same words I had said months ago without knowing they would become symbolic. Ethan's eyes met mine deep and warm. "With you two, they taste like home." The words wrapped around my heart like a promise made quietly but meant fully. Lily reached out her tiny hands, placing one on mine and one on Ethan's. Then she squeezed. The world outside the window kept moving. People walked past, cars rushed by. Seasons changed without asking permission. But inside that cafe, time paused. The three of us sat together again where everything began. No declarations, no labels. No rushing, just a beginning. A family forming not out of need but out of choice. Out of kindness. Out of love growing in the quiet places. As you sit here with me at the end of this story, I want to ask you something gently, quietly, the same way life sometimes asks us to pause. Did a moment in this story stir something in you? Maybe it was the way two strangers found comfort in each other without planning to. Maybe it was the courage it takes to show up for someone, even when your own heart is uncertain. Or maybe you saw a piece of your own journey in the way healing arrives in small, unexpected gestures. Stories like this are not just narratives, they are reminders of who we once were, who we still are beneath the noise, and who we might become if we allow kindness to guide us a little more than fear. And if while listening you felt warmth rise in your chest, or a memory you thought you had forgotten tug gently at you, then you already know why this channel exists. Because even in a world that often feels too loud, too fast, too fractured, there is still a place for stories that breathe, stories that sit with you the way a friend would, stories that remind you that love does not end, that hope does not wither, that broken things can be rebuilt even if they never look the same. Maybe you came here tonight just to pass the time. Maybe you stayed because something in this journey made you feel seen. And if that is true, then let me tell you this. You are exactly the reason I tell these stories. Every single week, someone writes that a story helped them get through a lonely evening, that it made them call someone they had been avoiding, or that it reminded them that they still deserve softness even when life has been anything but soft. And if this story touched you like that, even in the smallest way, I hope you will take one more step with me. Not for numbers, not for algorithms, but so that the next time your heart needs a place to land, you will already know your seat is waiting. When you subscribe, you do more than follow a channel. You help keep alive a corner of the internet where gentleness still matters, where we choose compassion over judgment, where stories are not rushed but allowed to unfold with the quiet dignity they deserve. You help these stories reach someone who might be sitting alone tonight needing exactly this reminder. Maybe a widow missing the warmth of a familiar hand. Maybe a single parent trying to hold everything together. Maybe someone who has forgotten what it feels like to be chosen. You might never meet them. You might never know their name. But your presence here becomes part of the reason they find comfort, and that is no small thing. If you felt yourself rooting for Lila and Ethan, if Lily's innocent hope opened something tender in you, if you found yourself thinking about the people in your own life who once helped you stand again, then you already understand what binds us together more than any screen ever could. So before you go, take a breath with me. Hold this moment of warmth just a second longer. And if your heart whispered even the faintest yes while you listened, then let that yes be the reason you press subscribe now. Because there are more stories coming, stories of healing, stories of second chances, stories that remind us that even when life changes us, it never takes away our ability to love again. And I would be honored to share them with you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end. And until our next story, remember, this hope is real, love is real, and no matter how many times life asks you to begin again, you never have to begin alone.